for this project, we're going to be restoring a 1972 manufactured Case Sod Buster. And this knife has been used, but not abused necessarily, and belongs to an acquaintance of mine. And right now it's in honored, sanctified repast in his toolbox, and it gets used. And he used to carry it on his belt, but he doesn't need to carry it on the belt anymore. But at any rate, it's had some use, and so we're going to try to bring the edge back in its most efficient way. But first we're going to discuss what you need to do with an edge. Typically with a knife of this age, your edge profile looks like this. It's been worn, through the passage of time it's worn off, and we're going to need to restore that. Secondly, on a knife of this age, many times, the blade profile, the edge profile, is worn kind of in a wonky fashion, for want of a more technical term. Usually they start to wear right along in here, and then also a funny little protrusion starts to occur here because the stone hasn't gotten clear to the base or of the knife, the edge. And so what occurs is this starts to develop here, and also this little protrusion occurs here. And if you'll notice on the newer, this blade's only been around since about 2016. It's very full right here, and it hasn't got the protrusion right here, this little sharp apex right here. And so what that does, as time goes on, your stone starts hitting here, 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 and here, and you get a dull spot that can't be eradicated. And then to get rid of this, sometimes you start wearing here, and so you end up wearing out a bunch of blade in order to get this eradicated. So what we're going to do is discuss how to deal with that, and then we're going to go on to some other things. Now to deal with this real quick, like you can use like a 3-point file, and you just want to file that down, or even some of these little diamond files have a little flat spot on it, and you would just flatten this down and to where you have a straight line across the edge, like so. And to use something exaggerated, proportions exaggerated for graphic clarity, you can see this. Randall manufactures their knives from the factory with this, so you can also change your grip, but what's also very important is your stone always goes to the very end of the, or to the very base of your edge. So like right here, I hope the camera's catching this, you can go clear to here. Well, what's happened with this old case is because of this lump right here, this spike, you can't get down here as far as you would like, so that starts to develop this strange thing here. So we're going to eradicate that problem and help with that. And so we're also going to discuss, in between things, the proper use of the sharpening stones. Now this is a Norton honing cradle. It's got the 3 stones, and these can be bought online from your cutlery houses, and some cutlery stores may have them, but many times you've got to go to a regular butcher supply or something. And then sometimes you can spot smaller versions of this at like Home Depot or Lowe's, and some of them are diamond coated, but basically they're all the same. They have the 3 different stones, and this one has an oil bath, and in that oil bath you just simply use medical grade mineral oil. You can get this at Thrifty's or Rite Aid or Ralph's or wherever, and it's just plain old laxative mineral oil, and it's a food grade product, so you can use it in your kitchen with completely safe, or your restaurant or your packing house or whichever. So anyway, the first thing you would want to do is we're going to clean that up in just a second, but to get the edge going the way you want it to, we're going to restore the whole edge. We're going to show you a couple things here for proportions exaggerated for graphic clarity. The best thing to do is you want your stone level so you can have a complete control of your blade. So we're going to exaggerate things here for just a little bit. These arrows are just put on here for just visual, and then we're going to have this angle here so you can get an idea. So this thing's rounded off, and we want to get it that edge re-established. So there's controversy as to what the angle of the blade should be right here. Now some people say as steep as 25, and some are down here as low as 15. Depends upon the manufacturer, and you know, it's like in the good old days there was the muscle cars. You had Chevy, Ford, and Chrysler, whichever one you wanted to argue about. Well, it's basically whichever angle you figure you want to argue about. And that would depend upon the thickness of the blade. For example, this big thick Randall, you're going for this angle here, whereas on the case you would be trying to angle with this thinner angle here because the blade is thinner. So anyway, basically you want to maintain the angle. It can't be overemphasized. So you want it to look like this. This is your ultimate goal. You have an equal angle. I can't remember what the correct term for that is. I dropped out of geometry to take British literature, so please bear with me. And for you people that can't do math, can't do change for a nickel without a calculator, I feel your pain. So anyway, there's a correct term for this angle. Now the reason you want to pay attention to maintaining the same angle with both sides of the blade is you can do this. And what occurs here is it acts like it's sharp, but it's not. It's almost as bad as not having it sharpened at all, because what will happen is it'll deviate and it just won't cut right. So you want to make sure that each angle is correct on both sides of the edge of the knife. Secondly, as you're going along, this little burr will start to develop, and we're going to talk about that and removing that in a second, because if you don't eliminate that for a lot of your applications, for like your pocket knife or your hide peeler or whatever, this will just break off and it'll make a microscopic flat spot, which is essentially in English is spelled dull. Because you actually cut, your cutting takes place right here. So if that little feathered edge, or some people call it a feather edge, some people call it a wire edge, if that breaks, it makes a flat spot in your cutting. So we're going to show you how to eliminate that. So at any rate, we'll get to the good old case here in just a second, but one more thing. So when you're sharpening on the stone here, we've put the arrows on here for graphic clarity. And so if you suffered in California schools in the good old days, there's these things called a protractor. So you can take one of these, you can put it on the stone, and you can kind of figure out where you want to be and just try to duplicate that. And then when you come over here, you can kind of do the same thing. And you can just, it helps immensely. So after a while you just kind of go by feel. So anyway, you come down the stone making sure you've got the correct angle. Like you would come clear down to here, and the angle here has to be the same as the angle here. And as you go down here, as you progress down the blade, this angle here with this blade needs to be the same. So you have the angle of the grind is equal all the way down the knife. Because if you don't, you'll have this will have a steeper grade here. It may not even meet, and it's just a pain. So anyway, we're going to work on this thing here a little bit, and then we'll sharpen it up. Here's a quick recap. The edge of this final case looks about like this. It's been worn, it's all rounded off, and just from the passage of time, it's just in need of some help. You can see it's all rounded off from wear. Our ultimate goal is this. We want a nice, even angle, and since the knife cuts right here, we want to make sure that angle is correct. You have an equal angle on both sides of the center, so you want that is your most efficient cutting surface, cutting angle. You don't want this. You want to make sure that the angle is squared. You geometry instructors can leave a comment in below so we get this right. You don't want this. You want to keep these things equilateral, I think is the correct term, because this will not cut worth a dink. It might work on an axe maybe, but or a dozer blade, but this for a fine piece of cutlery, if you're going to dress a hide, or if you're a sushi chef, you want those thin slices of sashimi, this won't happen. So that's our ultimate goal, is not to have that happen. Now there's a controversy in cutlery land as to various recommendations as to the angle. Some people say as steep as 25 for the angle of the edge. Some say as shallow as 15. Now a sushi knife might be here. Your snow annealing double bed axe might be here. So it'll all depend upon the application of the knife. Now, one other thing we're going to address in this process as well, during the sharpening process, depending upon who you're talking to, there's a little phenomenon that happens right along here called a feather. Some people call it a feather edge, some people call it a wire edge. And we're going to address that here in a minute, because you actually would like to eliminate this because this can break and leave a little micro flat spot. So we're going to show how to deal with that problem too. So we're going to go through that. Now, looking carefully, I put some arrows on here to kind of help for the viewing audience there. So you'll be like so. So this angle here, as you're coming down this blade, is going to be the same here, because you've got this angle here. It needs to be the same. And when you get clear down to here, this angle here needs to be the same as this angle here. And we're going to do this with the case over here, but we're doing this just so you can see it better. So to make sure you saw that again, you want the angle to be like so. 90 to, whichever angle you decide, right here, this angle here, when you finally get down to it, it needs to be the same as this angle here. Now, through the wonders of television, miracle of science, we've relieved the angle right here. And also we've cut out a little bit right here. And depending upon whose nomenclature you're quoting, it's called a choil or a shoil, depending upon if you're parler français or just a Yankee imperialist and call it the English term. So basically what we've done is we've relieved it kind of like here on the Randall, and I use the round Easy Lap diamond hone to do that. So what will happen now is, like right here, when we get on the stone with the case, we'll be able to get right up to the base of the edge, and so it'll have a good clean edge all the way through. And as I pointed out earlier, these knives have a tendency to wear a high spot here. And if you're trying to get rid of that high spot wrongfully, it will take and carefully, you can build up this high spot, and what will occur is you're trying to get rid of that, and you end up wearing here and here, but you don't sharpen here. Okay, now, this is a good old faithful Norton honing cradle. First we'll start out easy, real quick like here with a coarse stone. Noticing we're going to keep it, in between that magic number, and I just kind of have a feel that I use now. And there's several techniques, but in my view, the first ones you should cut into the stone first, keeping the angle all the way down, keeping it same. Trying to keep that angle there, right at the edge, the same as the one here. Okay, as you're progressing, we're still here on the coarse stone. You'll have to watch and kind of move with the angle of the light, and you will see grind lines starting to appear. The old grind that was on here was rounded, and it's probably got a bit of a dull finish to it. But this is the coarse stone. You will actually start to see. You may need to cheat, or since Sherlock Holmes used a magnifying glass, feel free to use one. And so you'll start to see where the stone is starting to cut away the high spots, and so you'll get into the edge. And an edge that's this used, or been used as long as it has been, you may have to stay here on the coarse stone a little longer than you might for a knife that's just been in regular usage. Also, sometimes if you've been given a knife to sharpen that looks like the owner tried to carve paving blocks with it, or he was using it for masonry and not skinning a hide or something, you may have to stay here a long time to get rid of it. But here again, at this stage, you'll start to see colorations and changes going. If you're grinding in a high spot, you'll see the burnishings from the, it'll match the coarseness of the stone. Anyway, one thing we need to make sure of is when you're working on the stones is to use the entire surface of the stone. That not only helps the process go quicker, but it saves wear and tear on the stone. It keeps the surface wearing evenly. And I don't know if the camera is showing it or not, but at this point you should start seeing filings and pieces of stone, pieces of grit and steel. Looks kind of gray. You might be able to see some of it. So also a good policy. You can hopefully you can see some of that grit coming away. At some point you'll need to flip the stone to clean out the grit. And sometimes also it's a good idea if you're on a stone for too long of a time, you get to see a white area starting to appear here, is to take and flip the whole shebang. And so you're wearing on both sides of the stone, and you don't get gouges and wear off the corners, because you do want this entire surface to be used. And as a review, the oil we're using here is food grade mineral oil, and you can use it safely in the kitchen. If you get it on your hands, it's not deleterious, it's not harmful or toxic. As a matter of fact, if you look on the back of some of your high dollar cosmetics, somewhere in the ingredient label might be a little bit of mineral oil. At any rate, we've switched up to the medium stone here, because if you can, I don't know if you can see it here, but the edge is starting to form, and this poor blade has had so much wear there'll be highs and low spots in it and stuff, but we're just trying to keep it as continuous along here as we can. So here again, through the miracle of TV, we're using the finer stone here, and this is going to start wearing out the grind marks from the previous stone. And this is taking longer in real life, in real time, than it is here than we're showing you, primarily because sharpening a blade kind of loses its charm after a while. But here again, keeping the angle the same on both sides, trying to utilize the entire surface of the stone, keeping it even, and then making deadly sure to keep the angle here the same as here. And here again, this is an acquired skill, and the end result is always gratifying, because when you can get that deer hide off quicker, or you can get the task in the kitchen done quicker. And when I was working in cattle, you can get your ear marking and whatnot taken care of a lot quicker if you got a good sharp edge. And at this point, you should be able to start to see the edge starting to polish. You won't see the striations that were left by the coarse stone. Okay, at this point, since we've been on the medium stone, what's starting to develop is I'm hoping the camera can pick this up, you'll be able to see that this edge right here is starting to come in a uniform shape to it, and it's starting to be the same here as it is here, and you can start to see the reflections of the grinding. Also at this point, something interesting is happening. You can feel, be careful, when you pull away like this, you can feel that the feather or wire edge, depending upon your definition, this is starting to develop. This edge here is starting to develop, and so this is telling you that your edge is getting to this condition here. So we keep going here, and you can listen and hear the difference between the two stones. And you can also, be very mindful as you're watching along the edge, you can see the grind marks starting to come from the further up the blade, clear down to, like, ground zero right here at the end. So you can start to see this evening out, and when that starts to take place, you can switch to the next stone up. So we're at that point, pardon the pun, at this juncture. So we're going to flip up here to get to the finer stone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of give it a bath to expel the grindings. I don't know if the camera can catch it or not. So we're now nearing the end, and we're here on the Norton calls this their India stone, and they make a couple of grades of it. This is the finer of the two. So we're continuing on, and this is, as I said, this is starting to even out here, and you can see on this thing here there's a little bit of wear to where it's not, the angle here is a little different in it, but what do you expect from a blade that's 40-something years old? And I don't know if the sound is picking it up, but you can hear a difference in the grind, in the grit. It's a little different. And also on this different color of stone, you can be watching for the filings and stuff starting to appear. Okay, now at this point, we've been on the fine stone for quite a while, and through the miracle of television, we've gotten to the point now where this thing is sharp all the way down. And this is something you don't show the children. You can drag a thumbnail across right here, and you can feel it drag all the way down, which means the edge is at this point here. So we've got this forming. You got the little feather edge forming. Now, as I said, this is deleterious to really efficient cutting. You can hold it at an angle and it'll pop hairs off your arm and it looks really spiffy, but this is a deleterious situation. So we're going to finish up just a little bit more here to make sure this is all even. And if you drag your finger away from the edge, you can actually feel that feather edge. And it still exists. And so as you go lighter with pressure all the way down here, it starts to disappear a little bit. So at this point, we're pretty much finished with these coarser stones. Now this edge would be perfectly good for most kitchen work. You could peel a hide with it real well, a real good working edge. But we're going to really finish this thing off and show you how to do it with this. Now, through the miracle of television, we've changed abrasives. This is a kind of a rare commodity. They used to be more readily available. This is a crystalline black hard Arkansas stone. And we're using the smaller one here today, primarily because the other one I've got is kind of expensive and I didn't want to drag it around here to the studio. So here again we've got a little bit of the food grade mineral oil obtained from a nationally advertised source. So it's just regular old food oil, mineral oil here again. We're going to apply a few drops here on the stone, give it equal, make sure it's well covered. And here again, this is a food grade oil, and it's not harmful. If you drank too much of it, you'd spend a lot of time where you don't want to be. Okay, because it is a laxative. So here again, maintaining the same angle, lightly stroking here on the bilateral on both sides. Occasionally, you can feel the grit from the previous stone, so you may have to clean the blade off, get rid of the grit from the coarser stones. And sometimes, like if you were going to re-edge your straight razor, you might take and simply hand wash this with soap and water, good old ivory liquid or simple green or whatever, to just get that grit off. So we've pretty much eliminated it on that. At this point, it's not just being obsessive about being germ-free or something, but the cleaner the stone is, the finer the edge. So basically, we're trying to accomplish the same thing. Just kind of dressing it up. Here's where it gets a little tricky. So we've gone down here enough, and we'll check it to see if it's still there a little bit. Now here's where the tricky part comes in. Just so we're not fooling anybody, that's where it is. Now, if you feel up to this, sometimes if you have a really long feather edge, you can take and do this trick here. You set it up at a relatively steep angle and lightly, like with the weight of the shadow, just barely touch it. And you can do that a couple times and you'll feel the feather edge disappear. And the object is you use the finest stone you've got with the very lightest of pressure. And since you're doing this with very light pressure, it may take a couple times, but this is one thing you can overdo. So I would give this about, I think we've taken, what, about 10 strokes? I wasn't counting. So that's how you restore the edge of an old case, just to prove we're not completely fabricating. And if you want, I don't know if you can show right there, but it'll shave fur. Thank you for watching, and please remember to subscribe and like, and continue to watch for future updates. Thank you and goodbye.